What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. This is the Science Dispatch podcast. Dr. Chuck Dinerstein just bounced back in his chair a little bit like he experienced the backdraft. You okay over there, Doctor?
I am fine. I'm okay. Not to worry.
Okay. Very good.
So when I don't make noise for a few minutes, you have to be concerned.
Yeah. If you start quietly twitching or if you don't react at all, then we got a problem.
Yep.
Okay. This is our bread and butter, taking on some popular health memes, food memes. This is an article by Dr. Josh Bloom. It's called "The Terms Ultra-Processed and Synthetic Are Flawed for the Same Reason." Okay, so his point here is a very good one, Chuck. Pretty straightforward. Basically, you have these two terms. They apply to different health debates. One has to do with chemicals that are synthesized in the lab, which is a very scary process for a lot of people that they don't understand. And then you have
many undergraduates found it a scary process.
I get it. It's complicated stuff. That's why I have you guys here to answer all these questions. And then, of course, the term ultra-processed is just like mega bad food. Double plus mega bad food, ultra-processed, candy bars, Twinkies, nacho cheese dip, like that kind, like ultra processed. So anything that falls into that category is supposedly bad. Josh's point, which is really helpful, is that the qualities of a food determine what it does in your body. You know, how many calories does it have? How much vitamin A does it have? How much sugar, et cetera, et cetera. This is what's going to determine whether it's good or bad, whether there's too much or too little. Same thing with synthetic, right? The fact that it was made in a lab doesn't matter. It's what your body does with it. So there's all kinds of natural examples, arsenic, lead, whatever. Lots of things that just grow out of the earth that could kill you. It doesn't matter that they weren't made in the lab. So that's his point, right? Is there's objective metrics that determine whether something's good or bad. None of them comes down to synthetic or ultra-processed. I think that's his point. What's your take?
I think, he's getting back to the natural, fallacy that everything that's natural is good and that anything that is not natural is bad. But there's several problems with that. First of all, some things that are not natural have been around for such a long time that we don't recognize them as not natural. Light bulbs are not natural. Being up all night, having light available all night and not being dependent upon sun to determine our day is not natural. But what are our arguments now? Our arguments now are about whether we should, have daylight savings time, not whether we should abandon our concern about it altogether. So that there's that part of it. And I think that the other tension that always lies in there is how you aggregate and disaggregate things, how you lump things together or divide things up. And the people that are concerned about ultra-processed and synthetic have divided things up in a way that I think makes sense to them and has some value, but it doesn't map as well to outcomes as they think it might. Now there was an interesting piece just this week talking about whole wheat bread and the fact that whole wheat bread is no better for you than ultra-processed Wonder Bread. And that certainly runs against our thinking. But as it turns out, what happens when you talk about whole wheat bread that's available in the store is that the components of a whole grain, which has to do with the husk and then the inner components of it, have been separated out long ago and are brought back together again in making the whole wheat bread. There's a component of bran that's put in. There's a component of the wheat germ that's put in. And that's what, when you look at the composition of it, it's a whole grain at that point. But your body processes those things much differently. When it doesn't have the bran, the outer wrap around the germinal seed, it processes the germinal seed just as quickly as it would if it was processed flour. And so when you talk about a whole food, if you're talking about a whole wheat bread, it has to be made from whole wheat, period, end of the conversation. As the way the researcher put it is, if you took an ingredient and you put it in a cup of water and you come back in an hour and it's mush, then it's not a whole grain. A whole grain will still be there looking the same way it did, before. And I think that really gets to this whole problem of process and nutrition and this and that, is that we have one kind of categorization to break the components down to talk about how they're processed, but our body does not process things in that way. And so it's useful in some ways if you're concerned about labeling, but it's not as useful in terms about talking about what may be healthy or not healthy, or nutritious or non-nutritious for you. And we've been fighting this battle about, the holistic versus the component approach for 3 or 4 centuries here. And it's fair to say when breaking things down has taught us that certain foods do not have various nutrients in it, and we can bolster those nutrients by adding them in one way or another. So that there's an advantage to looking at the components of food because it can advance things. But there's also an advantage of looking at things at a higher level, a more holistic level. Again, when you look at something like the sugar spike associated with carbohydrates. Complex carbohydrates break down more slowly, and they're going to leave you feeling full longer, but they will break down.
I guess my problem is with ultra processing, it's not particularly helpful scientifically or nutritionally. So as an organization for a long time, we've told people don't eat too much sugar, don't smoke, it's not bad, it's not good for you, excuse me. Don't be a drunk, right? Like there's ways to quantify behaviors and tell people to limit them. But I don't think looking at the processing is helpful for a variety of reasons. But I mean, I have fruit in my fridge right now. I can knock back a ton of grapes real easily, right off the vine, all natural, no processing, unless you count, every step to get it from the vineyard to my grocery store, if that doesn't count as processing. You know what I mean? But like, I can overeat fruit very, very easily, and there's a ton of sugar in it naturally.
Well, there is this. We do like numbers more than we like descriptions. And because we like numbers, and we try to quantify things a great deal, and the quantifications then become the basis for regulation because law does not like gray. Law likes black and white, and there's nothing more black and white than a number.
Yeah. Well, I was about to say the lawyers love it too, because who makes all the ultra processed products? Well, naturally, it's the companies with all the money that we want to file lawsuits for, right? It's helpful for that. It's helpful for regulators. It's scientifically, it's useless, I think. But if you're an academic and you're trying to do studies, this is a very helpful category for when you're writing your grant proposals, right?
The NOVA classification is a great example. Now, the NOVA classification has become the de facto gold standard for deciding what is ultra-processed and what is not. But it cannot tell you what is nutritious and what is not. And there's a raft of papers that talk about this. But now, as the MAHA movement gains traction and our eyes are trying to define this, I've been reading by several academics that while the NOVA classification doesn't do the job we want it to do, we can't abandon it because all of the research so far is based on that. And we would have to start at ground zero once again to do that, which it just shows you that, if you're talking about regulatory capture, that's a great example of scientific capture, that this is the way we've been measuring things for so long that we can't abandon it. Because we would have to begin again, and God forbid, well, maybe.
If you get rid of my process, I won't have my process anymore, right? That we've lost the plot at that point, right? Your job is to do science to tell us helpful things about the world. It's not to do science to do your science.
well, and I understand the wanting to do science, but it really gets back to the drunk looking for his keys.
Right.
We can't always look for things under the streetlight.
Right. Yeah. It's not that complicated. It's you know what I mean? You've written about research where they disagree about what NOVA category to put foods in. There was that one study I always like to throw that at people where they constructed a diet that was 91% ultra-processed food and it met every plank in the dietary guide. You know what I mean? Like it's nonsense. It's useful for journalists who are writing headlines that are trying to scare house moms, and it's useful for academics, and it's useful for lawyers. It doesn't do anyone else any good, I don't think.
Okay, so I think that here's my 4 categories then. There is food that's tasty. There's food that is disgusting. There is food that I would like to eat. And then there's food that I'm told by my wife that I'm going to eat.
Yeah.
And that's that. And hopefully on that Venn diagram, there's some overlap.
Kevin Hall, the infamous or famous NIH researcher, he gave up on the ultra-processed thing, and then he settled on, well, it's hyperpalatability, which is pretty close to what you just said, which is foods I like to eat.
Yeah,
right.
He's been the only guy that did any real paper of substance on ultra-processed foods, and when he was interviewed, admits that he eats them.
Right.
Right. He's in terms of my scientific heroes, he's way up there on the list.
Right. So we spent, I don't know, however many bazillion dollars on all these studies, and we're right back to where we started, which is that food tastes good and people like to eat food that tastes good. Thank you so much for that illuminating research, Dr. So-and-so. Very helpful stuff. We're getting too far afield. The bottom line from this article is these terms are horribly imprecise. They're not helpful. And turns out you still have to look at the calories and the nutrients in a food. You can't just say, oh, it's ultra-processed. I guess it's going to kill me.
Well, we'll be able to come back to this topic in a few weeks because they're already behind on releasing the definition of ultra-processed from the federal government.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that one. Looking forward to that report. Thank you, guys. We're going to break it down here. All right. Once again, the story is called The Terms Ultra-Processed and Synthetic Are Flawed for the Same Reason by Dr. Josh Bloom. That is at acsh.org. When you're there, click the subscribe tab, punch in your email address. We'll send you the stories we write. The ones you read are usually the ones we're talking about. By the way, there's also a donate button on the homepage right there. We would greatly appreciate your support. We've got a 26 for 26 campaign going on right now. We have a very generous donor who's going to match your donations. So if you send us $26, it's going to be matched. We'll take any donation amount. We're very grateful for all the support. But if you like our work, if you benefit from it, consider contributing to that campaign. We'd greatly appreciate it. We are on X at ACSH.org. We're on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at the American Council on Science and Health. Thank you as always. We'll see you next time.